Sculpture Trail training. And the handout that I just am passing out is the one that is available on the Volunteer Wiki site. So if you're on there and you look to the right-hand column, it's called Sculpture Trail. I think it's Sculpture Trail Notes, but Sculpture Trail something. And yeah, so I just want to start with a little bit of background about the Sculpture Trail. This is the third summer that it's been open to the public. It's relatively new, and we are still acquiring sculptures. The idea is to acquire at least one thing every summer until we have up to about 30 works of art out there on the Sculpture Trail eventually. And the Sculpture Trail is something that, you know, we had the idea for it long before we actually built one. We were talking about a sculpture trail on this hillside even before this building was built up here on the hillside. So it took a while to get there, but I think we had a fabulous designer. Walter Hood, I put a tiny little picture of him in there, was our Sculpture Trail designer. He's a landscape architect. He's done some really high-profile things like the garden at the De Young Museum in San Francisco's Golden Gate Park. He's currently, in addition to having his own landscape design and not construction, but the design firm called W.J. Hood Design is the name of his firm, and it's in Oakland. But he's also currently a professor at UC Berkeley, where he teaches, actively teaches there. And he travels all over the world to lecture and do projects. We were very lucky to get him to design our sculpture trail. He's also an artist himself. And one of the things he's known for, and it's one of the bullet points on here, is that he likes to take what exists already in the environment and repurpose it for better use. So, a good example of that for our project was, those of you who have been around for a while remember the parking lots used to be big, wider, not longer, but wider. The lower lot where the staff parks actually had 3 rows of parking. There was one in the center, a row for cars in the center, and he looked at that and he said, "You're overparked." It just is, the experience for the visitor walking from the parking lot into the building is, the people are just like looking down because it's pavement and walking into the building. And we really would like to get people to stop, slow down, really appreciate why this museum is located here where it is, and be prepared when they walk in to have the best experience possible. And we really did notice that right away, that instead of just walking down the middle of the parking lot, people now will get on the trail, they'll walk more slowly, they'll look around, and so it's doing what he wanted it to do. I put a couple really nice quotes from Walter Hood there. He says, "If the landscape is powerful enough, it can move people in fantastic ways. That's what I'm interested in. It's all about scaling so that the landscape and art become legible." And that's another thing he did, which I really like with our sculpture trail. Before we hired him to come up with a design, some of us have been thinking, well, wouldn't it be nice to have a little footpath that goes up in the sage, uphill from the museum? And in some ways it would have been, although there are lots of ticks up there. But his good point, his best point was, if you put sculpture out there, this landscape is so vast it would just disappear. You wouldn't notice it. And we almost see that with the huge herd of bison that the Buffalo Trail sculpture that is 150% life-sized. I think we all had this mental image that it would be this monumental, and it is, but when you drive by it, it really blends in with the landscape. It doesn't jump out at you as much as we thought it would, which just goes to reinforce Walter Hood's point. So, with that in mind, the main feature of the sculpture trail is this concrete pathway that runs north to south. It runs right through this amphitheater area in front of the building, and most of the sculpture then gets placed on or along that sculpture trail. He liked to call it sculpture trail and terrace, because you have the landscape dropping off behind it, so when the sculpture is there, it becomes almost as if it's a stage for it, and you don't miss it. It's not blending in with the sagebrush and getting minimized by the vastness of the landscape quite so much. So it works really nicely. Yeah, I just mentioned it. So some people ask, how long is it? We have about 3/4 of a mile, and that counts the concrete trail walkway along the east edge of the property, and that also includes the footpaths, of which there are 2 main footpaths. One is the loop that goes down to the Buffalo Trail sculpture at the south end, and the other is the footpath that goes from up by the, well, we'll go out there, up by the Moose, sort of where the Moose is. It goes and connects with the Cafe Terrace down behind. So, any questions before we start? What we will do, I think, is we'll start right at the north end and we'll just walk the main lake. We won't go down and do the footpaths, but I'll point down to the Buffalo Trail piece from up above. Does that sound okay? All right.
And it's handicap accessible, right? Most of it is where
The
you
concrete,
hike down.
yes, except for the footpaths where you hike down. Yeah. Okay. The underpass connection, so we didn't have to come up with the funding for that. It was just really good timing that they were ready to do the pathway from town of Jackson north up to Moose, and that was the same time we were planning our sculpture trail. They realized that, we had some meetings, they said let's do an underpass. So we're really happy with that. Makes it safe for people to cross the highway and come up to the museum. Okay, let's walk to stay warm. These pieces right in the entryway here were here before the sculpture trail was built. Penbun's Deer Looking Back, Whitetail Doe Looking Back. I need to correct the title. I think I have it as Deer Looking Back on the paper. And then Walter Mataya's Wild Turkeys. So those have become... Now, of course, some of you know we're going to redo the entrance to the museum in the not too distant future, so those will probably move at some point. And most of you remember that before the sculpture trail was built, the road, the entrance, visitors would drive right up past this area we're standing on. They could let people off right under the porte cochere and then park this way. So part of Walter Hood's design, which seemed like more than we were asking for at the time, but I'm really glad that he did it, was to widen what was a one-way exit on the backside of this berm of where the lost birds are. So he widened that to accommodate incoming and outgoing traffic, and then closed this off to make this pedestrian-friendly program space. We never had it 3 years ago. It was brand new. We've been starting to use it for programs, mixed media. Sometimes we have like live birds out here with a sculpting class. We had a series of Riot Act did some plays out here the very first summer. They did a Greek theater thing, so it's been really fun to have that space to try different programs. If you wonder about these bollards here, when we first closed this off to make it pedestrian friendly, there were a lot of people who were very concerned that if the weather is bad, we still want to be able to drive through there. So these bollards were put in and designed to be removable. So if we want people to drive in, we could remove them and have the traffic do that. From my point of view, we want to train people not to drive through here, and it's taken a while to change the culture of what people expect, but I think it's much nicer to reserve this for pedestrians. So. But I'll just mention while we're out here, with the new design that's being worked on right now for the new entrance would push the covered entrance out this direction, so when people get off their buses right here, they only walk a few steps and they go inside. That was part of the reason people were concerned about this rerouting of traffic. Oh, they're going to have to walk so far. Well, it's not that far, but it's a change of culture, getting people used to different behaviors. So Walter Hood, when he designed the trail, he designed everything from the benches, custom benches, to there are 2 boulder benches with the cut stone with the inlaid wood. There's one at this end and one at the south end. And even the lighting in the parking lot, some of you may remember it was wooden poles going up, and it was starting to rot, and they were starting to lean and tip over. So we're fortunate that those light bollards all got replaced, and much more energy efficient, much nicer. Hopefully will last a really long time. Let's pause for just a second and look downhill, because that's part of the sculpture trail. I think I have it listed on here. Bart Walters Wapiti Trail. We have quite a few pieces of his in our collection. There is at least one other of these. There's one in Colorado somewhere. So if you get visitors who say, "Oh, I saw this somewhere else," that is true. They may have seen it down in Colorado. But it's a beautiful piece. One thing you may or may not know is the stone is not actual stone. It's cast concrete. He had a whole separate artist who worked with him just to create the concrete look like stone and colored it. So it was colored to match what was the stone on the building at that time, which was a more reddish stone. And then a few years after that, as you know, we replaced all the stone on the building. So I don't know, someday we may want to, I think it looks fine actually. The sculpture on the underpass down there, I'm going to blank on the artist's name. He's from Wisconsin. And I should have looked that up, but I'll add that to the document. It's not on the document that you have yet, and I'll add that. It was a contest, so Jackson Hole Public Art funded that piece, and there were several artists considered, including some local ones, but this guy was selected. He's fabulous, and I will get the information for you and add it to the document. I should know because I go through that underpass pretty often. If anybody ever asks you about the donor medallions inserted into the trail, the development department oversees that, and they are still accepting donations. I couldn't quote for you the prices, but once Ann Scheffling gets up to the speed, Pontier was the one who really started that project, but Ann will be taking it over. So the sculpture at the farthest north end for right now is Isis, and that one is on your list here. It's, Simon Gudgeon is the artist. He's from England. He's a UK artist. He's very well-known contemporary artist over there. We got introduced to him through his participation in our Western Visions show and sale in the fall. Jen Lee had met him and got him to be a part of that show and sale, and then we decided to acquire one of these pieces for our sculpture trail. The bird is an ibis. And then you can see in my parentheses there, Isis, the title, refers to the Egyptian goddess of nature and creation. The ibis is a crane-like bird that I've been told migrates through here but is not commonly seen. I have never seen one here. But you can see he's really well known for his semi-abstract style, he calls it. Very smooth contours, beautiful forms. I love the negative space formed by the head curving and the neck curving, and the eye also is this negative space pulled through the piece. Just a little bit more information about that piece. There's another one in Hyde Park, so if you get international visitors, they may have seen another casting of the same sculpture in Hyde Park. And then Simon told us he also had sold one to Prince Charles for his private garden. So there's another one there.
And the one in Hyde Park is the only new sculpture that's been added in like the last 50 years.
That's right. So there's a huge homage.
It's in the center of London. And I did, because I have friends that live in London, and they went off to look at it after I sent us a picture. I said it's gorgeous.
It's the same sculpture.
Same. Yeah.
Oh, while we're up here, can you see just to the right of the hedge concrete pad? That concrete pad is awaiting the spotting scope, and we'll be putting them in as soon as I can coordinate with Ron to help drill the holes. But we will have a spotting scope. It looks like a telescope, and it rotates, and it's really nice optics. So one there, one at the far south end of the sculpture trail, and another one on the Cafe Terrace. So soon, very soon.
They will stand up to the weather.
Yep, they're beautifully, very, very nicely made. They will be out there all year round. And you have to kind of get up here to see it, but there's a sign up here under the interpreter panel that says Lost Bird Audio Tour, and that can be done with any mobile phone. You just call up that number, and there are 5 different stops, meaning each of the 5 birds has a different message, and it's all done by Todd McGrain, the sculptor, so it's really worthwhile. So on a warmer day, when you have some time, if you haven't already done so, and you don't even have to do it from here, in fact. I should, when I update this resource, I'll put the number on there, so if you're on your home computer and want to listen to it before you give a tour, you can call it up from your phone at home and get the same message. It's not
available also in those recording things that you
No, it's not. That's a good question. It's not on the audio tour wands. It's separate. Eventually we'll probably get consistent. Right now we have 2 options for audio tours. The wand, which is a general tour of permanent collection, and then the on-sale audio tour, which you have to use your own personal phone to do, for the lost birds and for the conservation gallery, which is the old Bison Gallery, in that space, there's a personal cell phone tour option in there too. Yeah, it is confusing for visitors, so I'm glad you asked. Once in a while, you'll have a visitor with the audio on, like standing in the conservation gallery saying, how do I access this information? You say, oh, well, you don't, use this device for that. So eventually we'll get more consistent, probably. So, but these pieces are fabulous. They started out as being a temporary installation was it 2 years ago? I think so. 2 years ago, or was it just last year? It was just last year. Yeah. Feels like they've been here for a while, but it was just a year ago they went in as a temporary installation, and our plan is to acquire all 5 of them.
Wow.
And through the Collector's Circle, we've been able to acquire, I think we now have 3 of the 5, and there are 2 more we're hoping to acquire. So each year the Collector's Circle is trying to get one till we have all 5. Todd McGrain got very interested in extinction of bird species. So these are all 5 birds that have become extinct in, fairly recent times. He says in the modern era. I'm not even sure exactly what that means. But the 5 birds are the great auk here on the right, the passenger pigeon all the way at the top, the Carolina parakeet right below that, the heath hen that looks kind of like a chicken up to the left, uphill, and then the Labrador duck just below that. And Todd McGrain created these as monuments to these species that have become extinct. And part of his project, the Lost Bird Project, and that's on your resource too. If you look up, there's a link here, but I'll add the, let's see, lostbirdproject.org, I think is what it's called. I'll update that so you have it. But he researched and found out where the last known member of that species was seen before it died off, and then they were all gone. And he placed one of these birds, just like they look here, in that location. Yeah. So this map here, we'll take a few steps closer. So this map here shows that the last known auk to ever live was at Fogo Island in Newfoundland, and there's one, I've seen pictures of it on the website. It's like out in the middle of nowhere on some rocks at the edge of the ocean. If you traveled there, there's a little plaque that tells you why it's there, but it's not a place people visit very often. The Carolina parakeet is in Kissimmee Prairie Preserve State Park in Okeechobee, Florida, and more people would be able to see that one. The heath hen is on Martha's Vineyard, and he tells these stories of all these birds. The last one had a name, and the people who lived there were very fond of it, and it would, every evening, he says, it would go up in this tree and beat its wings, like sending a message out. That's what they do when they're trying to attract a mate, but it was the last one. So then it eventually died, and that was the last known heath hen. The Labrador duck in Elmira, New York. The passenger pigeon, the last one died in a zoo in Columbus, Ohio, and so that's where the monument to that one exists. They all have really interesting stories. The Labrador duck, the last one, like a 12-year-old boy went out and shot it, saw an unusual bird and brought it in, and they identified it and realized, oh, we thought there weren't any of these left, this must be the last one.
What about that, what is it, ivory-billed woodpecker?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I wonder if that will end
I think maybe that's a really good question, and I'm guessing it's still not completely known, and so...
Some people think they've seen one.
Right.
But
other people say, no, they couldn't have, so... But they're beautiful sculptures. I asked him when he was here why they're all about 5 feet tall. Obviously they're not in scale with each other. The parakeet's huge, and so they're all relative to each other because he wants it, and they're all relative to us. And he said that was his reason for doing that, was he wanted people to be able to walk up to them and relate to them as you would speaking with another person, to make that connection. With that in mind, I'm not sure why he wanted to locate them where you have to climb up some stone steps to be eye to eye with them, but we'll see. Someday we may decide to move them somewhere else. So the bike racks, there's a set of these 3 up here, and there's another set, which you see when you drive up the hill. They're at the bottom of the stairs that go down towards the underpass. Local artist Ben Roth made these, and Again, this was funded by Jackson Hole Public Art. They actually bought the 3 down near the closer to the underpass, and we bought these 3, but they're the same animals. Ben Roth was inspired by animals and paintings in our collection. So the raven is, you recognize it? Yeah. It's Robert Bateman, from the Robert Bateman painting. The bear is from a Bob Kuhn painting, and the fox is another Bob Kuhn painting. Okay, let's keep going. Oh, yes, we should look at, ooh, that ram needs washing, doesn't it? So that one is on your list. It's Tim Ostermiller's Emperor. And this one, some of you may remember, was, it was kind of temporarily located here. We weren't quite sure where we wanted to put it. And then we liked it and created that pedestal and the foundation for it, and it became more permanent. But he's in our permanent collection too. Most of the artists whose work is out here right now are in our permanent collection. Not all. Todd McGrain with the Lost Birds, we don't have him inside. I mean, he's permanent collection because we've acquired those, but we don't have his work inside the building. That's what I meant to say by permanent. Permanent collection artists who are also inside the building. Most of these are, but it won't always be the case.
Is he inside?
He is.
No, I haven't.
Got a couple things with the stones. So this is a good place to view the stones. Some of you may be wondering, okay, what's with all the stones on the sculpture trail? And originally the stones were not part of the design. I mean, he was going to have a few here and there, but they weren't as prominent a piece of the design as what you see here. And when this sculpture trail was created, Walter Hood was out here he came out for many site visits leading up and then during the construction. And we stood down there where the road comes up and crosses at that intersection, and we watched, while we were standing out there, we watched 3 cars turn up and try to drive up the sculpture trail here, and he realized we needed to do something to discourage that. And he didn't want to just have a chain bollard or something blocking it off. That doesn't look very attractive. So he decided, we had lots of stones on the property anyway, and he decided to make them part of the design feature here. He wasn't here when they were being installed, and I tried my best to translate his design ideas. He said I didn't quite get it right, so someday we may be changing it a little bit. Especially I didn't get it right down below. There were supposed to be 2 rows heading towards where the cars are parked. He wanted 2 rows of boulders on the trail and then some off the trail to the left, but those light bollards were blocking kind of to get the grid that he had asked for, so I made the decision to put them all on the trail, and he didn't like that. But someday we may change that. And it makes nice homes for marmots and ground squirrels. They like it a lot. But what happened here, some of you may remember, but it looks like rocks are tumbling down off the wall, which is what he wanted it to look like. But originally, the wall just ended and there was a patch of grass here. But in order to put the sculpture trail feature in here, the elevation had to come down about 2.5 feet to make it not so steep and to make it all connect correctly with up there. And so there was this section of black tar on the lower part of the wall that was exposed. And instead of re-rocking the whole thing, we just took rocks that were already on the property and he asked them to be pushed up against it. So that's the reason for that. Sometimes it's helpful to know the reason for some of these design features. Some of you may remember we used to have this out on the Cafe Terrace. Joe Halco is the artist. This was a piece that was created back when Francine Carraro was director, and we had what was the title of that exhibit? It was Southwest something or other.
Desert something?
Desert something. And this piece was part of that exhibition, and then the museum acquired it. And so it's all welded steel, I believe. The label is not out here yet. It will be. Joe Halco is the artist. I think it's called Horned Toad. A very simple title. Timber Bugler is Tim Schinnebarger is the artist. And we have some of his work inside too. Some of you may recall that piece used to be up where the moose sculpture, Sandy Scott's moose, which I just realized we didn't stop and talk about. But Sandy Scott created the moose up top, and she also did the eagle down at the end of the trail. And so we moved this here when the sculpture trail was being constructed to get it out of harm's way, and everybody liked it here. So we decided to keep it here instead of put it back where the moose is now, which was its original location. And then just this summer we put in the stairs. We might want to take a quick walk up there. Has anybody been up there yet? It's new. So let's take a quick walk. a new construction with the stairs coming up. It is a really nice spot. I could picture people maybe coming up and bringing a picnic lunch. Has a really nice view up here. Yeah, I just wanted you to see it because it's new. But this is it's really nice. I think it is a nice positioning here of this sculpture because as you drive up, you get to look at it from different directions. Most of the sculpture out here, people ask about scale, most of it, the artists seem to have consistently gone like 150% of life-sized, approximately. I know that's true with Bart Walters' Wapiti Trail. Thank you. For some reason I keep missing the title of that one today. He's about 100, he's like, you know, another 60% over, you know, so 1.5 times life size. Approximately true for this one. That's approximately true for the, I think for the moose too. They all seem to fall in there about 150% life sized. Of course, some of the birds really vary from U.S. artist, and she will be one of our featured artists for Western Visions. So we'll get a chance to meet her and hear her do some talking about her work. So that will be in September. An interesting thing about these pieces is she's created a whole series of coyotes, and they are, again, the labels aren't out yet. It's out here this summer, but like the titles are something like Coyote 4 and Coyote 3 or something. There's some numbers attached to each of them. So they weren't necessarily, these two were not designed to be seen together as a pair, nor were they designed to be positioned necessarily just like this. Our curatorial department made the decision about how to, which two. First they chose two out of a whole, you know, group of coyotes she did. They chose these two, and then they decided to position them like this, so it looks like almost like this one's doing like the play, kind of challenging the other one to play. So it's, yeah, just they're beautiful. As you can imagine, kids love to sit on them, and we're really not supposed to let kids sitting on them. It's okay to touch any of the outdoor sculpture, but people shouldn't be climbing on them. We shouldn't have dogs, we shouldn't have skateboards, we shouldn't have bicycles. But it's very hard to enforce all this when the signage isn't out here. So, you know, if I see somebody who looks like they're being dangerous, I'll ask them to not. But you know, sometimes I just say, you know, it's not their fault. They don't know. The signage isn't out there yet. It's fine to touch, but please don't climb on the sculpture. We understand. We don't have signs out here yet, that kind of thing.
I thought there was one by Sandy Scott's Moose because
There might be one.
Yeah,
There might be
think
one
there is
there.
because I've seen
People try and climb up.
riding. I've seen them twice.
Yeah, people
riding.
do. It's a
Yeah.
challenge
Yeah.
for sure. So let's just look down from here at the bison, and they are on your list. This is Richard Loeffler, and the title is Buffalo Trail. And he's a Canadian artist, and he worked on these for many years. They were in production, but they're cast bronze. He worked in clay, and then it was cast into bronze. This is the only installation. You won't see another one like this anywhere else, which isn't to say that there will never be another one, but it's such a monumental undertaking. It's hard to imagine anybody else commissioning that. It was commissioned by the museum. Kavar Kerr, one of the daughters of Bill and Jaffa Kerr, really loves this artist and got interested in this and talked to the collections committee about it, and it was her pet project to try to make this happen. So it's really nice that it did come to pass. On a warmer day, we'll go down and look more closely. Let's just point from here to the eagle sculpture. So the Sandy Scott, who I mentioned in the moose up above that we didn't really stop and talk about either, but she created some presidential eagle. Okay, so the title of Presidential Eagle refers to the fact that there is the same sculpture at the Clinton Library in Little Rock, Arkansas. And it was, so she did it for that. Initially, the first one went in there, although we have cast number 1 and they have cast number 2. So we purchased the first one, actually, and we had it kind of waiting till we built the sculpture trail. Cast number 2 is at the Clinton Library. But Sandy Scott's a Wyoming artist. She lives in Lander, not too far from here. She's a trained commercial pilot. Before she started working full-time as an artist, I think she still flies planes, but she loves to sculpt birds because she says that her knowledge of the aerodynamics of flight informs her ability to do birds in flight. So that's kind of an interesting fact about Sandy Scott. While we're inside, one is when you were noticing the zigzagging pathway up. Some of you know this and some of you don't, but historically, before the museum was built here, it was a campground with a swimming pool down by the road, and then there was a chairlift that went up that zigzaggy part so people could get a view of the Tetons. So it was very commercialized. So when the Kerrs bought the property and they had thought that they might want to create the museum here, it was kind of restored. But some of the remnants from when the campground was here, like that zigzagging pathway up where the chairlift went at one time, is still there. Yeah, so that's what that is. And then, the last thing I want to mention is the stone sculpture that's being built. I should have made a picture. I'll add it to we have a picture of what it's going to look like. It's really exciting. It's a bison form, but very abstracted. It's very round, and it has a hole in the middle that's been cut out that kids can crawl through. And the inside hole is highly polished, and the outside is more rough, but kids can get on top, if you picture kind of a donut shape almost, and they can also crawl through the hole in the middle. And there will be an adult bison and a calf. A smaller one. The calf won't have the hole through the belly. It will be just a solid piece that like maybe a 2- or 3-year-old could sit on. And most likely it'll be installed out on the cafe terrace out there with the idea that while parents are eating, the kids can climb on something appropriate instead of trying to climb the wall out there, which we've all seen them do. Yeah.
When will that be?
It will be by the end of next summer. He anticipates being finished.
So who's doing it?
His name is Stuart Steinauer, and he's a Native American from one of the tribes up in Canada. He lives in Canada, and it's a beautiful, beautiful piece. He's done one before that Adam saw, just one of the bigger adult bison, and then we talked to him, and he's going to do a bigger one and a smaller one for us. But Adam saw it in a playground somewhere, which was interesting. And he doesn't do a lot. He's not, I mean, stone, when you work in stone, you don't do huge numbers. So we feel lucky to be getting one of his pieces. Any questions?
That was great.
Enjoy the sculpture trail. Encourage people to come up. It's always free. You know, people can bring picnic lunch up there. And another thing that I'll mention is eventually when we push this entry, so the plans are to push this entry out that direction so people can get off the bus and come in, and then this will be pushed out this direction too, and the museum shop will fill this space. It'll move upstairs. And the reason I'm mentioning that is because once this space gets bigger, there will be a couple of bathrooms up at this level, so people who just want to do the sculpture trail and not pay, because it's free, can come in and use the bathroom without going downstairs and get information. Of course, our hope is that anybody who uses the sculpture trail will get so excited they will want to come inside and pay and see the rest of the museum too. Thanks.
Thank
you. Yeah.